Welcome to the 700 Club. Vice President Pence has made it crystal clear he will not invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. Now the push is on from Democrats to impeach the president a second time, and more Republicans are supporting the effort.
Critics warn that impeaching the president will fire up even more division in the country. The big question, is it constitutional? CBN's Caitlin Burke explains.
The House is ready to move forward with impeachment today after passing a resolution last night calling on Vice President Pence to remove the president from office by invoking the 25th Amendment, a choice Pence has made clear he will not make.
In a letter sent to Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Pence said, quote, "Last week, I did not yield to the pressure to exert power beyond my constitutional authority to determine the outcome of the election. And I will not now yield to efforts in the House of Representatives to play political games at a time so serious in the life of our nation." House Democrats now plan to move to impeach Trump. If successful, it would make him the only president in U.S. history to be impeached twice. At least 5 House Republicans plan to vote to impeach the president, possibly up to a dozen, including Liz Cheney, the third highest-ranking GOP lawmaker in the House. In a statement, she said, quote, "The President of the United States summoned this mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack," adding, "There has never been a greater betrayal by a President of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution."
Impeachment only incites more division. It does not provide unity.
Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs, who opposes any action against the president, called on Cheney to resign her leadership position. On Fox's Hannity program, constitutional attorney Alan Dershowitz called the impeachment vote theater because the president will likely be out of office before the Senate can hold a trial.
The Constitution only empowers Congress to impeach and remove a president from office. Once he's out of office, Congress loses jurisdiction. They can't have a trial.
President Trump, meanwhile, is not taking any responsibility for the attack on the Capitol.
So if you read my speech, and many people have done it, and I've seen it both in the papers and in the media, on television, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate.
According to the Washington Post, the FBI issued a warning a day before rioters stormed the Capitol that violent extremists were headed to Washington, prepared to commit acts of violence and, quote, war. Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen says no resources will be spared in protecting the public in the days to come. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Well, CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now for more. And you just spoke with Senator Chris Coons. What's the latest from the Democrats?
Well, I talked to Senator Coons about why are Democrats pursuing impeachment when Trump will likely already be out of office by the time, if the Senate is to convict him, by the time that would happen. And he told me that there are other reasons that they're pursuing impeachment besides just removing him from office. And those include part of these articles of impeachment would bar President Trump from ever running for office again. They would also strip him of financial benefits awarded to former presidents, like pensions, things like that. So that is why Democrats want to move forward with this, because they want to make sure that this just takes away any chance of President Trump ever holding office again.
Well, so they're invoking the 14th Amendment, which is there's literally no procedure for that. There's no history at all. And all of that was put into place after the Civil War. Once you take an oath to support the Constitution, if you're ever involved in an insurrection against the United States, then you lose your political rights and you can't be an office holder anymore. This is the first I've heard they're actually going for the pension rights. What about Secret Service protection? Is that on the table?
I'm not quite sure if I would hope for President Trump that they would not remove Secret Service, because we are in crazy times right now, and I'm sure there would be many security threats on his life. I'm not quite sure about Secret Service, but we are in truly unprecedented times. And, you know, Republicans, on the other hand, while there will be some Republicans like Congresswoman Liz Cheney who will support these articles of impeachment, the majority of Republicans are still against them, and they're urging their Democrat colleagues to move forward, uniting the country. And they worry that pursuing impeachment is only going to fuel the fire in a time where in this week it is crucial we see a peaceful transition of power that many aren't so sure we're going to have.
Well, you're standing right in the middle of the Capitol in the Rotunda. What's the atmosphere like? Here we are a week after this, something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. What's the atmosphere there?
Well, Gordon, it's honestly very somber. Where I am, there's lots of media, so today is a big day. It's buzzing here. But yesterday, when I was walking through the Capitol, you see them repairing the door to the House chamber. They've cleaned up a lot, but also just when you look at the U.S. Capitol Police Force, they've lost 2 of their own in the past week, and they're hurting. They're sad. You see that in their faces. One thing that gave me hope, though, is as I walked in the tunnel between the Cannon House office building and the Capitol, there are all these notes written by staffers, written by lawmakers. I even got to write one of messages of encouragement for the U.S. Capitol Police, thanking them for saving lives last week. But it's definitely somber. Tensions are very high, and they still have the inauguration to prepare for next week. And here on the Capitol, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of members of the National Guard now guarding the buildings, huge fences around the Capitol buildings, around the Supreme Court. It's very hard to get in right now, but I think people are very afraid of what could happen in the next week, especially as this vote on impeachment goes forward this afternoon.
Tell us what the staffers are feeling and thinking right now. I shudder to think what would have happened if any member of Congress or the Senate had been in the hands of that mob. What would have happened to them? But I know some of the staffers hid themselves in offices and tried to barricade the doors, and there were protesters banging on those doors. What are they expressing right now?
Well, I would say one detail we should not overlook is, praise the Lord, because of the pandemic, there are very minimal staffers that are on the Hill right now to begin with. I can't even fathom what would have happened if the Hill was at full staff last week, where there would have been thousands more people here when the protesters came through. But I think everyone is shaken, and as someone who has worked at the Capitol for 4 years, I have always felt so safe walking onto this building, and I don't have that right now. After seeing last week something I never thought I would see in my lifetime, it's just crazy. And I know right now there's the National Guard there, but what's going to happen in a few weeks when tensions go down a little bit and some of that added security is taken away? I think the Capitol Police is going to reassess all the security here on the building. But what I also worry about is these lawmakers that are being threatened in their hometowns and their family, where they don't have the same security that they do when they're here in D.C. working. That's something that Senator Coons told me, that he's received multiple threats and his family has been threatened. And I think we might even see some security for lawmakers when they're back in their home districts.
You knew one of the Capitol policemen who died. Tell us about that, and tell us what you're going through right now.
Oh, I mean, it's just awful. Officer Howie, he worked at the door that I walked in almost every single time I came and went from the Capitol in the past 4 years. He he unfortunately committed suicide after the attack. He was working on Wednesday, and then a couple days later, he decided to take his own life. And it's terrible. I went to that door yesterday to talk to some of the officers who work with him, and there's flowers and a memorial set up for him. But I cannot express enough how every time I walked through, he was smiling. I would always have a little conversation with him. He was so joyful. And to think that somebody like that would make the decision that he did, it's awful. It's honestly unfathomable. When I saw the report and when I saw this picture, I can't believe it.
No, I can't either, and I can't believe what happened last Wednesday. It's something like you. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. Abby, as your uncle, please stay safe and please stay protected. I'm praying for you, and I thank you for your service and for being there today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, in other news, big tech has made another move against President Trump. This time it's from YouTube. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon, and if I may, I would like to say welcome back to Abby as well. YouTube will not let President Trump's channel upload new videos for at least 7 days. The decision made over concerns about the ongoing potential for violence following last week's riot on Capitol Hill. The firm also suspended comments on the channel indefinitely. The Google-owned video service is the latest big tech firm to take action against the president after Twitter permanently suspended his account last week. That move has been criticized by international leaders in Germany and France, and many in the United States who are worried about big tech censoring conservative voices. Well, despite the spread of the coronavirus, governors and local officials in hard-hit parts of the country are resisting new lockdown measures. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is pushing states to quickly start giving vaccinations to people 65 and older and younger people with certain health care issues. It's part of a move to slow the spread as the death toll keeps climbing. The country now is averaging more than 3,000 deaths a day, with the post-holiday surge not yet at its peak. Some warn it could top 3,500 a day, even averaging up to 4,000. Well, the Supreme Court says a woman must go to a doctor's office, hospital, or clinic in person to get an abortion pill during the COVID-19 pandemic. The court granted a Trump administration appeal to enforce that rule, which was suspended by a judge because of the pandemic. The Biden administration could reverse that decision. Well, turning overseas, the United States is imposing new sanctions on high-ranking Iranian officials. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announcing the sanctions after accusing Iran of having secret ties with al-Qaeda. Pompeo cited intelligence declassified since the assassination of al-Qaeda's number 2 in Iran in August last year. He said since 2015, Iran has provided the terrorist network a safe haven for its leaders, including logistical support to travel, the ability to communicate with other AQ leaders around the world, and even helping to raise funds.
They are partners in terrorism, partners in hate. This axis poses a grave threat to the security of nations and to the American homeland itself. I would say Iran is indeed the new Afghanistan as the key geographic hub for al-Qaeda.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, Israeli warplanes attacked Iranian-backed militants in Syria, the strikes killing dozens of fighters along the border with Syria and Iraq. Staying in the region, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a bold move that could alienate President-elect Joe Biden. As Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports, the potential consequences highlight the coming changes in U.S.-Israeli relations.
The move in question, Prime Minister Netanyahu's authorization to build hundreds of housing units in Judea and Samaria.
It's important to understand that now we are entering a more difficult time with President Biden, who will soon be coming into office. So Netanyahu is trying to take advantage of the moment before Biden takes office to create a few facts on the ground.
Netanyahu has his own political concerns as well, with Israel facing another election in March.
One way of getting support from the right-wing voters is by announcing there's going to be new building in Judea and Samaria.
Reclaimed during the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel considers Judea and Samaria its biblical heartland, promised to the Jewish people by God. Palestinians in much of the world call it the West Bank, view it as occupied territory, and want to see it become part of a Palestinian state. David Rubin, former Shiloh mayor and author of Trump and the Jews, said Trump has been very good for Israel.
President Trump has been the best president in history, in the history of United States-Israel relations.
Among his accomplishments are recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem.
That's a fait accompli. Biden's not going to go back on that. Then the recognition that the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria are not illegal, which is a big change from what Obama, Bush, Clinton, what they all were saying before that.
Palestinians were angered by many things Trump did, including his Jerusalem moves, defunding of the UN body responsible for Palestinian refugees, and the Abraham Accords between Israel and 4 Arab states. While Biden is considered to be a friend of Israel, he is also expected to be more sympathetic toward the Palestinians. Meanwhile, the foreign ministers of Germany, France, and Jordan met in Egypt. They released a statement urging the resumption of credible negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians and reaffirmed their support for a 2-state solution. So for Israel, the heat is on. Some fear the favor Israel had with Washington during the last 4 years is likely to be replaced by pressure the Jewish state felt before Trump took office. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Gordon, back to you.
Well, let's get some fait accompli facts on the table, just as Rubin expressed. The move of the embassy was based on an act of Congress, so this isn't an executive decision. Trump finally pulled the trigger on what Congress put in place way back in 1996, and so because it's an act of Congress to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, Biden's going to have a tough time saying from an executive position it would need an act of Congress to change it. Same time, there's an act of Congress. There's 2, the Taylor Force Act, and then there's a Terrorism Act from 2018 that allows Americans to sue the recipients of any foreign aid from the U.S. if that foreign aid is tracked to acts of terrorism. So you have within the Palestinian Authority a Shaheed payment program where they pay terrorists to kill Jews and kill Israelis. And the more havoc you can wreak, the more you get paid. But that would expose the Palestinian Authority to suit in U.S. court by U.S. citizens to say, we want our tax money back. And so that would literally put them in legal wrangling for years. So that will probably stop any kind of funding to either UNRWA or the Palestinian Authority. So those are 2 established facts. What's not established is sovereignty over the West Bank, and a lot of people disagreed with the Abraham Accords just for that reason, that Israel was expecting to extend sovereignty throughout the West Bank. They didn't do it in exchange for peace from the Abraham Accords. There's an open question, will that peace process with other Arab states continue, or will it be short-circuited? And will we get back onto some kind of illusion that the Palestinians really want a state? I've said it many times. I don't believe they want a state. I believe earnestly what they teach their children, which is let us drive Israel into the sea. They've never had an intent to form a separate Palestinian state. They believe in a one-state solution, and that one state is Palestine. With no Israelis and no Jews, and let us drive them to the sea and let us have an ethnic cleansing. That's exactly what they did to the Jewish quarter in Jerusalem during the period from 1948 all the way to 1967. They ethnically cleansed the areas that they had, and no Jews were allowed in. That is their goal. They've been saying it for decades. It's about time we believe it.